In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Brothers and sisters, the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all. I would like to invite to take a moment and think about the wonderful gifts of the historical memory our sister, mother, grandmother, Rosemary is leaving to us. Open the doors of your hearts, your dreams, and take those wonderful gifts forever and ever. Amen.
First reading, Ecclesiastes. There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the sun. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to uproot. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to tear down, and a time to build, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones, and a time to gather them, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain, a time to search, and a time to give up, a time to keep, and a time to throw away, a time to tear, and a time to mend, a time to be silent, and a time to speak, a time to love, and a time to hate, a time for war, and a time for peace. The second reading from Matthew. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn and lean from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light.
Please take a seat. This is a moment to say see you soon to Rosemary. It is a privilege, it is an honor to have a gentle person, a gentle woman like Rosemary, a woman who spoke about the love, who lived the love, a woman who walked with the sandals, with a dust of love. I really admire Pat and Brendan and Pat, because in that family, you are the two shiny stones. Rosemary is because you, Pat and Brendan. And later came Jane and the two little seeds. But you are an example not only in the Maglades in Toronto, you are an example and inspiration in the world. The world needs love. And today we are celebrating the resurrection and love. To Rosemary and Linda, I learned many things. One of the things I learned was the love of a gentleman who put his sandals in the last dust of love, Father Desmond Maglade. 11 years ago, I had the opportunity to go to Haiti because they had an earthquake. And when I arrived in Haiti, I arrived at the house, community house of Father Desmond Maglade, the Spiritan congregation. And I had the opportunity to know Father Joseph Philip. Since that, Haiti is in my heart. Thanks to Father Desmond. Thanks to Rosa Maria, Rosemary, Linda, Pat, Brendan, Jane. Thanks to you. I'm full of gratitude of Rosemary. There is not words to express. My love is too small. Her life, we had the opportunity to see a small resume of her life in the documentary produced by his brother, Terry. Beautiful. Thank you, Terry. That is an expression of love. When I go to Mexico to share my life with the immigrants who are coming from Central and South America towards North America, the privilege I have in Mexico is to wash the feet of the immigrants. And it reminds me again, the love of Rosemary, because Pat and Brendan did that for a long time with this wonderful gift and creature. I learned a few words in Mexico from one of my friends. He's a wild artist, Adrian Pineda. When I came back from Mexico, he always said to me, Padre, vives en mi corazón y no pagas renta. Hasta la vista. Father, you live in my heart and you don't pay the rent. See you soon. Today, we have to say something to Rosemary. Rosemary, you live in our hearts, and your sister's hearts, and your Pat, and your Brandon, and your Jane, and your grandchildren, and all your family in North America and Ireland. They are celebrating with this. You are living in our hearts and you don't pay the rent. As well, we live in your heart and absolutely, we don't pay the rent. Thank you, Rosemary, for inspire and teach us many, many gifts, sisters and brothers. I would like now to invite the two shining stones, the inspiration, the pure love of Rosemary, Pat, and Brenda.
Good morning, everyone. Is this on? Can everyone hear me? Perfect. So to lighten the mood a little bit, we were just standing here, and I just kept thinking while we were standing, and Mom would be at a funeral. She always said, "Can we sit yet?" And while I was standing here, I kept saying, "Should I go up there?" Because I think Mom's saying we need to sit down. So that's all I was thinking when this was going on. Just these little moments pop into your head. God, I know you want to start, so. Just want to thank everyone. I have a few words to say after, if I can get through, after Dad. So we'll see if we can make it through. And Mom loved a good fanfare, so hopefully we do her proud and our words give inspiration.
Rosemary's looking down at all of us right now. And you know what a force she was. And she was a tornado of passion and love. She's up there in heaven, and there's probably all this upheaval going on because she's changing everything and hugging everyone. And I know she would be so proud to see her two favorite men say a few words about her. The problem with Rosemary was that she had, as Hernan just said, she had too many gifts. I had difficulty even trying to put words to paper because there's so much material to draw from. And I know I'm looking at all of you, and I know you know what Rosemary was like. She was a powerhouse. She was an unsinkable Molly Brown. She was fabulous. Before I fall apart, I think I'm going to try to follow my text. This is probably the first time in my life that I'm just going to read and Brendan jump in if I fall apart here. I'm so glad you're doing this with me. It was just last week, Wednesday, that Rosemary and I were having a wonderful dinner. She was drinking her favorite Chardonnay. Patricia had brought over, and Sabrina had brought over dinner to us. Now this is hours before she died. And this is what Rosemary's all about. So we're laughing. She has this pain in her leg. It was starting to swell. I was worried. But before I even called the ambulance, she's phoning Rosemary, Patricia, to thank her. I didn't find out until yesterday she was texting people to say what a great evening she had. So I said to Rosemary, "It's time. I think I have to call the ambulance." And she said, "No, I'm okay." And I said, "Well, just to be on the safe side." And so they arrived, and typical Rosemary, "Would you like a bottle of water, some Perrier?" They're strapping her up, and she's making them comfortable. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Don't worry. Don't worry." That's Rosemary. 5 minutes later, she was dead. And it was sudden, no pain. And I was so happy that she would leave this earth and go to heaven that way, because she, in the last 10 years, she never ever, Rosemary's cousin Frankie was saying this a few minutes ago to me, she never ever complained to anyone. If you ever said, "Well, how are you, Rosemary?" 1 minute later, she was asking you, "Oh, what about that sore elbow you had, the tennis elbow? How is that?" And that person would be spending more time talking about her. She was very special. One of Rosemary's favorite singers was Frank Sinatra. And I don't know if you know this, but when he decided to retire from singing and music, and he went to New York City, Rosemary's favorite city. When he went there, he sang a song called "My Way." Mike, I don't know if you're going to play that, but that was one of Rosemary's favorite songs. And it turned out that it changed, all of a sudden was a huge success, a big hit, that song and that whole concert. And that's how I felt about Rosemary. It was my way to heaven. She deserved it, and it was her way. Brendan just thanked you a few minutes ago, and I just want to pause for a second and just, again, I want to thank all of you for coming today to celebrate Rosemary's spectacular life. She was an amazing person. I had 50-year, not marriage, not relationship. I had a 50-year love affair. And anyone that knows us it was just last month that we celebrated Rosemary's 66th birthday and our 48th wedding anniversary. But Rosemary would always say, "How can this be? I'm 50 years old." That was always her comeback when we would comment on how long we've been together. I first met Rosemary in my family home, and it was probably, Rosemary was my sister Deirdre. It was her best friend. This is the first time I'm meeting Rosemary, and I was going to the washroom, she was coming out. This was like 1 in the morning. I fell instantly in love. Maybe it was lust. But I honestly knew as soon as I saw her, I'm going to marry this woman. And if anybody knows me, I'm extremely determined. But I knew it. This will happen. But it was bizarre because I was a 20-year-old chess player, York University, looking 15 with my little glasses. And Rosemary was 15, and no. If Brendan did what I did, I'd throw him out. Can you imagine? I mean, I'm a 20-year-old university student, and I'm going to date a 15-year-old grade 10, but she did look like she was 20. That's how we got away with it. People would say, "Well, why are you going out with that young boy?" She was very, very mature. We had crazy love. We didn't come up for air for 2 years. I don't think I saw any of my friends. I don't think I spent any time with anyone except Rosemary. We were just on the phone, writing, just doing stuff. It was crazy. My best friends weren't happy with me because I talked them into a 1 year, coming to the end of my university period, and I convinced them to take a year off, and we had to organize a tour around the world. And when I told them that I'd fallen in love with Rosemary and I wasn't going, I never heard from them again. So that was the kind of relationship and that was just the beginning. We married 2 days after Rosemary turned 18. And I know what you're thinking. No, we didn't have our first child until 14 years later. Not that from lack of trying, not from lack of trying. This is actually not my text, but I just want to tell a little story. I still remember the day, and most of you have heard this, some of you may not. I still remember the day when Rosemary said to me that we need to go out for dinner. I said, great. And she ordered a bottle of champagne, and she said, I have some news for you. I'm quitting my job. I said, you're quitting your job? We can't afford for you to quit your job. Well, you don't understand. I'm pregnant. I don't care if you're pregnant. You can't. And I broke down and cried like a baby. And all the staff came over, what's wrong? What's wrong? And that's how I found out about my best friend now. He was always my best friend next to Rosemary. Rosemary's number one, you were number two. Now you're number one. We had nothing in common, honestly, other than this passion for life. We both had a lot of energy. We loved every aspect of our lives, but we kept saying, what do we have in common? What do we have in common? So when you start a relationship that way, there's only two ways you're going to go. You're going to either grow apart or you're going to grow together. And we started to find things that we had in common, but we had to learn to do it. And one of them was learning to dance. I mean, you all know about Rosemary's love for singing and music. Thank you so much, Michael. You know Rosemary is so proud of you and loved you and loves this music. And this was a disco days, and we saw Saturday Night Fever, and we watched John Travolta dance. And I think we were probably the first couple in Canada to take disco lessons. Now, I am a very energetic dancer. As Brendan knows, I will dance the whole night. But I'm not very good. But that was one of the main, that was one thing that we developed together, was dancing. Then we started to go to concerts, and to show you how far back we go, we saw the Eagles in the 1970s when they were the opening act for Linda Ronstadt. Isn't that kind of, I knew Linda was good, but it's hard to believe that the Eagles ever was the opening act for anyone. Then we discovered running, and Rosemary, I don't know, a lot of people know that I do a lot of marathons and triathlons, but a lot of people didn't know that Rosemary ran 2 New York marathons. And I believe, Linda, you have a story about one of those New York marathons? So I'll leave that one for you. Where's Mark? Mark, maybe I have a new story for you. Okay. Rosemary's nephew, Mark, greatest storyteller of all time. And he would take my stories and polish it up, make it better, and we'd be at family get-togethers. And I'm going, wait a second, that's my story. And he was always telling it better. So Mark, if you want to come up and help me on this one. So Rosemary had a great sense of humor. And we're traveling, so we're going to New York for the New York Marathon. And we're in this cab. And Rosemary tells, and some of you have heard this filthy, awful nun joke. Sorry, Bernard, this is a joke about nuns. And I'm looking at the rosary beads around the mirror in the car, and I'm going, this is not good. And sure enough, he stopped the car. We're on one of the bridges in New York City, I forget which one, Verrazano Bridge maybe. All I know was it had to be at the top of the bridge, and he said, get out. We had to get out of the car because he was so insulted. And this is a New York cab driver who are probably the most vulgar people in the world. But that was Rosemary. Life was not always perfect between us. We had some bad days. One of the worst was when we were celebrating a wedding anniversary in Las Vegas, and not only do I like a lot of sports, but I like a lot of games. So a casino is like my favorite place in the world. And I got carried away. So after the concert, after dinner, Rosemary said, around 11 o'clock, she said, if you want to go up for a couple of hours.
She said 20 minutes.
I figured he probably was, which is kind of odd on a wedding anniversary. I'm leaving Rosemary. I got back
6 in the morning.
but my son came to my rescue.
I said, Mom, don't worry, he's probably the prostitutes, he was fine.
I'm telling you, I paid a price for that one. How many times did that one was thrown out?
I think for another 20 years.
Yeah. I know that Rosemary touched your heart, all of you. But she touched everyone's life. We had the privilege, because of my occupation and the industry I was in, we went to some of the best hotels, resorts in North America. And I am not exaggerating when I say that every single time that we went in a hotel or a resort, an employee would come to us. It wasn't me, but she was just being nice. And they would say, and I've been doing this for 22 years, and you're the nicest person I've ever met. Rosemary, I got a little tiring at times. Rosemary, why do you get all these compliments? But everyone loved Rosemary. She was very special. But Rosemary kept her greatest love for Brendan and Jan, and now Nora and Ethan. Sometimes I think Rosemary planned this, that she wanted me to be in a good space when she was ready to go to heaven, because it was only months ago that we moved to Aurora to be close to Brendan and Jen and my grandchildren. And it was only months ago where she said, you know what, I know I said we never get another dog, I want you to have a dog. So I got here a little bit late this morning, because my little female Visa, my little girl, her name is Zen, I had to drop her off. I wanted to ask one of you to dog sit, but since you all come in here, I had to find someone else. And I have this great friend, actually the whole family is wonderful. Their names are Colin, Rachel, Ella, and they introduced me to the vet. They've introduced me to our home, a person who cleans our house. Thank you guys. You guys have done a great job taking care of me. And Rosemary, it's like I'm sure she saw you riding your bike, Colin, and said, you need to start riding with Pat. So, I had my little girl. I'm now close to my family. It's like she was preparing. I'd like to stop for a second, and I want to thank you, Patricia. Patricia and Rosemary were so close, and Rosemary loved all of her family, all of her siblings, but I think there's a special place in her heart for you, Patricia. You did so much for us. Now you have to care for me. Are you up to that? Where's Terrence? Sorry. Terrence, I'd like to thank you so much for that beautiful documentary, which we saw again last night. But watching it with Rosemary not here is so different. And I know that some of the people here may not have seen that documentary, so I hope when you have a chance to speak, maybe you can talk a little bit about that documentary. Brendan's kicking me. He wants me to wrap it up. Rosemary is looking down at us. And again, in terms of preparation, she prepared me to say these words, because we knew this day was going to arrive. So this is coming from Rosemary. Be in the moment. Cherish your family and friends. Be kind. Be generous. Enjoy every second in your life. And fight like hell when life becomes difficult. In other words, do not do my way, as Frank Sinatra said. Do it her way. By the way, you can call Rosemary in heaven. The number is 416-271-7888. And you'll hear the last words from this angel and love of my life.
I have a speech prepared, but not quite as eloquent as my dad. And no, I don't think, as we've all said, any words can describe my mom. And I don't think we're doing it after, but I think it's going to be hard, but I would love for all of you just to hear her voice message while we're here. And just, Jen, do you have my phone? I'm going to say a few words, but her life was beyond words. Her voice encapsulated who she was. I'll go off my speech a little bit here, but I said, where do I begin? With her soulful singing, her infectious jokes, and her passion for others. And the first thought that I had as a little boy was I suffered terribly from asthma and croup, and she would sing to me every night to get through it. And that, in my tough moments in my life, that's what's gotten me through, is her wonderful voice. I have a bunch of jokes that we all know, and I'm not even going to go through it. I just want to say a few things that Dad touched on. There are so many crude idiosyncrasies from her carrying around her. Any of you who knew her 20 years ago carrying around her comb, and you'd think, oh, is she combing her hair a lot? But no, it was to fix the tassels on the rug. Or when we were in Cambridge, you'd see her sweeping the street. And she met a lot of her good friends, Mickey, Gordon, all of our friends in Cambridge, and say, who is this mad woman sweeping the street? They said, this is my kind of woman. She's her attention to detail is unbelievable. A lot of my friends are here today that I've been friends with for over 20 years, and they always said, you know what, even when things were bad at their home, our house was their home too. My mom, didn't matter who it was, she created that sense of home. It didn't have to be the old Victorian home in Cambridge. It didn't have to be the beautiful home in Aurora. When you're with my mother, she created home. She was the matriarch. She was the zest for life. She was the passion and the soul that held everything together. And a lot of you are probably going to have to get a new GP now, because she was the doctor for a lot of people. And I said this last night, but there wasn't an ailment that anyone had that she hadn't been afflicted with. So you'd call and she'd say, in 78, I think I had that. And, she was the therapist, the doctor, the singer, the everything. And again, before I play the voicemail, which again, it's going to be hard, I think. It has to be done. But what I want to say is, it's true what my dad said. Maybe things are meant to be. Jen and I bumped up our wedding by 6 months 10 years ago this October. And my mom at that time was given 3 months to live. So who would have thought she would have had another 10 beautiful years, able to see her grandchildren, to see the dogs raised, to see this beautiful life for another 10 years, and never want to complain. We all, what I want to take away, everyone to take away today is, when you're feeling down or depressed or in pain or any affliction, just think about my mom on oxygen and still with a smile on her face and eating a good Swiss chalet dinner with a glass of Chardonnay. So if you're feeling depressed tonight, please order Swiss chalet and charge it to me and get a nice bottle of Chardonnay, okay? I think she would want that. So this is a little bit more formula off script, but I just want to say, families and memories are what we form together and what shape our identities. The stories that I remember from my life with my mom are ones filled with endless love and laughter. If only for a moment we have a person that touches us so deeply, just remember, do not take it for granted. Cherish it and hold it, because today could be the last goodbye. I love everyone here, and I know Mom does too. So thank you all for being here. But Jen, picks up, we're all in trouble.
If I could save time in a bottle, the first thing that I'd like to do is to save all the voice messages you're gonna leave me, and then I wouldn't be blue. If you'd like to leave a message for Rosemary Donnelly, please do so at the beep and have a great day. To leave a callback number.
That was her. That was her.
We would change our voicemail messages to reflect the holiday or the season. Towards the end, we wasn't updating as much. There was at one point we every other day. There's a new bird. We were coming next day with messages would be something like, "Oh, bird's coming over to ride your time again."
I would like to invite the sisters and brothers who want to say some words, please. This is the moment.
Well, well, Patty and I with me went to, well, with me I go out after that, went to harvest, and then, but they could put the cake, burn it down, they could put all the food, and with my eye and bring pair with Gogan out to see a movie. Thank you for the cake.
I think Brendan and Patrick said it all, pretty much. The Rosemary Full of Grace is probably the person that we will all remember. Her naturopath, Dr. DaCosta, said it yesterday. She was one of the few people he had met that had grace in the true meaning, that she transcended any earthly concerns in terms of health and sickness. She didn't go there because she didn't need to. She was above it. I think I just wanted to, as a sibling with Cecilia, Patricia, Leslie, and Terry, just to talk a little bit about, very quickly, her early years. And Rosemary, as you may have read, was the sixth child of 7 children. She was not a twin. I'm not a twin, but Patricia and Terry and Leslie and Kathy were twins. And I know that when we came along, Rosemary and I, my parents must have been terrified because they had 2 sets of twins in 11 months. And so Rosie and I came a year and a year after that. It was so sad, though. One of her favorite jokes was that when she was born, there was no more room left for her, so they put her in a drawer as a baby, which is actually true. But she was really worried when they closed the drawer. Our other big argument used to be, whose baby picture was this? Because all the photographs of little children were taken up by the twins, and by the time we came along, there wasn't much photographing done. And Rosemary and I used to fight over this one baby photograph we have. We think it's me, but it could have been her. Rosemary was someone who was, as Brendan and Pat mentioned, a mentor to practically everybody in this room. You called up and Rosemary gave you advice. She would tend to tell you things that should or shouldn't be done. She loved to be able to direct you which way you should go, and most of the time she was right. But she was someone who gave advice because she listened. And as Pat said, people would say to him in restaurants, in hotels, wherever, she was one of the nicest people they'd ever met. And that was because she saw you. She saw the person. She didn't see the color, she didn't see the height, she didn't see the economic background, she saw the person. And the person was the one she related to, which meant she could relate to everybody because there were no barriers in her life to who she was and what she gave to the world. Rosemary gave to the world love. She gave to the world a place where we should all be. Many times I used to think in my head, and I'm the older one, I would love to be like her. I would love to be outgoing, and I would love to be able to adjust to any situation. She could go anywhere, and she was not uncomfortable. In terms of her illness, I could never figure out how she got up every morning. And she did, and she never, ever, as was said, complained. She just didn't do it. And even if you said, Rosemary, how are you today? I understand you're not well. Well, I'm okay, but how are you? I know you have this and that. It's like, no, Rosemary, she never let you focus on her. She was truly a woman full of grace, and where she has gone now, her grace will extend to all of us, I think, throughout our lives. Patricia? Yes. Oh, I was going to steer away from some of those rather bad jokes. Rosemary actually was very involved. I wanted to say one thing before that one, in charity. And with Cecilia, Rosemary was absolutely in love with her. And we started a group many, many years ago called the Wednesday Night Live. And Rosemary and I were participants, and Cecilia was, of course, one of our participants. It was for adults with developmental challenges. And Rosemary used to come all the time and have people in stitches. But throughout the year, she also did some not so savory things. And the time we went to New York that Pat referred to, when she outgrossed the New York taxi driver, and Deirdre will remember that, she also ran the marathon the second time. And she had said to us, because the first time she didn't finish, and so the second time she was getting ill at that point, and she said, well, I just really want to start, but I won't be finishing, so don't worry. So we took her at her word, and Deirdre and I went to get tickets for a Broadway play, and we found Zorba the Greek with Anthony Quinn, and we thought, hey, this is great, 1 o'clock, excellent. So we all went off to watch a play on Broadway, and Rosemary finished the marathon. And she came running in, all excited, you know, yay, I actually did it. There was nobody there to greet her. It was, to put it mildly, it was a little bit deflating for her, but the play was excellent. That night, though, she did get up on a table in a hotel and sing New York, New York, because she was still on a high. And that was her. Like, it was, she was sad we weren't there, but hey, she was still going to have fun. And we have so many stories. There was the time we went to Washington, D.C. Patrick had a conference in Hilton Head. We drove Patricia's van, took her son Adam with for company for Brendan, who was a terror at the time. And we went to a hotel in Washington that we got on CAA, and it turned out it was like a 5-star or whatever. And by this time, Patricia's poor van was falling apart, and we had taped with masking tape the gas tank, and it looked disastrous. And we were talking about a hotel that had limos and Bentleys, et cetera, in the parking lot. We drive up. We didn't want to take our luggage out, so in front of this beautiful hotel, she decides we're going to take out the clothes we need for the night. So we've got all our bags on the driveway. Needless to say, it didn't bother her a lot at all. Rosemary was a character, and again, her grace shone through in everything.
So, I think, well, I'm Patricia, and Rosie and I talked at least 3 times a day on the telephone.
It was more like 10.
Oh, and it was usually about Linda. And, you know, I don't know what I'm going to do. We used to talk about the reality shows. We used to talk about Pat, Brendan, the grandkids. The best day of her life was when she moved up to Aurora, because she could be near Brendan, Jen, the kids, Sabrina, and, you know, because of, well, she treated all of my grandchildren like her grandchildren, Naya and Felix and Mia and I forget their names. And, you know, and Pat doesn't know this, but Rosemary asked me if I would give you my phone number so you could listen to me singing, because I was her backup singer. And like we used to sing, New York, New York, and then so that was my voice. And she said, you're not my backup singer anymore. So, and the one little story that I'll share with you with her moving up to Aurora was the fact of the joy of seeing all of the kids, you know, family kids coming over for a swim in their pool. And what'd you say? Want me to stop? Oh. You know, one of the best times was when, you know, no matter how sick Rosemary was, she always wanted to entertain. And the best day for her was the time, like a month ago, she had everybody from Cecilia's group home come up for a swim. And I guess altogether, Pat, there were about 14 people. And it was such a joy for her watching the young adults swimming in the pool. And at the end, she said, this is one of the reasons why I bought this house. And I am so happy and rested. Pat and I were running around like, what? But the joy it brought her, and this is the way she was, even, you know, in her darkest day, she always thought about other people. So, and thank you for coming.
I don't usually read from a script. I'm very much an ad-libber. So, this is for Rosemary. Rosemary exists in all our hearts, a glorious, hopeful, and helpful personage who never quit believing that she would, in true McGlade tradition, outlive us all. Her indomitable will was the source of her ability to beat the odds, an unknown medical device. Many doctors found in her perhaps a gene for longevity that was impossible to define. I feel, though, that today we must also raise our cheers for the ultimate caregiver, Patrick Donnelly. Her husband, friend, lover, and finally, the utmost unselfish caregiver. The documentary I made 4 years ago you should know that there's an expression, you don't know what happens in a marriage behind the doors. And I do now. You know, I saw a lot of how they reacted. And, you know, being with somebody for 50 years, you can either love them or hate them. And there was Patrick and Rosie kissing in front of the camera. And they did it with such ease. You knew it wasn't a put on. Oh, we got a camera rolling, we have to show them that we love each other. No, they just did it. Without his care, though, love, smiles, and with laughter, she would not have lived as long. He talks about how Rosemary became an encyclopedia of medical knowledge. But, Pat, don't you think you too acquired that knowledge to be able to tell a doctor to give her a massive dose of prednisone when he was arguing it wouldn't work because medical science knows all? And 2 hours later, Rosemary walked out of that hospital because of you. If there is one thing that doc gave power to, was the idea of patient advocacy when used properly can sustain life. Patrick, you gave up your life for my sister, your soulmate, and we need to honor you for your selfless devotion to another human being. May you live long and find happiness. Thank you, Patrick.
Well, I guess I get to do the end here. I'm the oldest brother, and sorry, can't hear me. I'm the oldest brother, and you know, when I was young, I was one of the twins, but the twins were always off doing their own things. And Linda's correct. We didn't notice Rosemary. I don't know how we missed her. She had flaming red hair and a loud voice, but we somehow did. But Dad didn't notice her. And I think he nurtured her. To become the woman that she became. I want to tell 2 stories about Patrick and Rosemary, and probably will embarrass Patrick, but Rosie would enjoy it. One of the stories is that on the spur of the moment, when they were living at the luxury apartments at Maybell, and if you know Toronto at all, you'll know what I mean. At that time, they were considered luxury apartments. One night we basically, and our cousin Frankie was also living in the same complex. That night we decided, I guess over a bottle or whatever, we decided to make a quick road trip to Cape Cod. Spontaneous, doing it overnight. Didn't plan how many days we'd be gone, but we just went through New Hampshire and Vermont. Well thought out. And of course, it was Patrick's brand new Monte Carlo. We had to make sure that we went a distance with that. And Cape Cod sounded like a far off place, and it was just somewhere to go. Well, after going through New Hampshire and Vermont and seeing the green and white mountains, we ended up in Boston that night. And on the spur of the moment, I decided, I guess, because I was a fan, Boston and Montreal were playing that night, so we decided to get some tickets, and we got basically 2 tickets. And Frankie and myself, in actual fact, saw Montreal win the Stanley Cup that night. So it was a great night. It wasn't a great night for Patrick, though. He decided to take Rosemary to a really nice restaurant to have a night out. Little did he know that when he left the table for a bit, maybe he went to the washroom, I don't remember what the story was, but other men approached Rosemary. She told that story so many times I can't even remember exactly what the end of the story was, but it was not good for Patrick. You know, Boss Gag says, once a story's been told, it can't help but grow old. Lovers do, roses too. So cast your seasons to the wind. Well, I don't agree with that. This is an epic love story that deserves retelling. And the first house that Pat and Rosemary bought was at Armadale, and there's a pub at Bloor and Armadale. And basically on the sign there it says the blessing. It says, old whiskey, fast horses, and a warm heart. Well, Pat and Rosemary surely did enjoy the good things in life. And I think that spirit transferred to the rest of us to allow us to also enjoy the best things in life. They were lucky to having found each other. And as to a warm heart, we know all about that. Thank you for coming.
Rosemary's cousin Diane. And a couple of things I'd like to say about her. As they said, she always gave advice, and we would talk for hours on the phone, and the only time she'd say, well, I have to go now because my manservant's calling me for dinner. And you could feel the love in her voice when she said that. The other thing, she always had those little phone jokes. And my favorite one was the Easter one, where she'd sing, here comes Peter Cottontail hopping down the bunny trail. Oh no, don't do that, rabbit. Little jokes always. But in closing, I want to say to all of you, God gave us a special gift when he gave us Rosemary. He wanted to teach us to be nice to one another, to love everyone, and to remember her that way. We had a long conversation 2 weeks ago. We could talk to her about anything. I told my friend Joe, Rosemary always you could tell her anything and she would never judge you or, say bad things. Goodbye, Rosemary. Everyone loves you, as we can see, and we will always remember you.
Brothers and sisters, friends, the peace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the peace of God of life, the peace of Rosemary be with you all.